All right. So today we are going to go over some key resources for STAR Champions. We're going to talk about testing expectations for this year. We're going to go over some frequently asked questions and some clarifications that we wanted to share with you guys. Talk about product updates and things that are new in the STAR system for this year. We're going to hit on progress monitoring guidance. Also talk about goal setting. We're making some changes to our recommendations for how we set goals for this year, so we'll touch on that. And then we'll finish up with talking about some upcoming training opportunities. So that is what we're covering today. All right, so to jump right in with the resources for champions. So first, I want to just mention that we had sent out a email for STAR Champions, like I said, it was last week. If you did not receive that email, because maybe you weren't on our STAR Champion list at that point, go ahead and email starassessment@philasd.org, and we can share that communication with you. We're going to highlight a couple of things from that communication, but it'll be a good reference for you to have. Let's see, let's jump in here. We recognize that some of you are new STAR champions. We assume that a school leadership appoints somebody to be a STAR champion who actually has previous knowledge of STAR and some good expertise. So we don't cover a lot of like basics in this in our champion sessions because we think you should already know the basics. However, we also know sometimes that you get put in a position that maybe you weren't expecting. So if you are brand new to STAR, you don't know much about it, we have some resources here that will help you. So there's that STAR 101 and 102 are slide decks that the PACER team put together that cover some of the real basics for you of STAR. Those would be good for you, but you also might find them very helpful to share with your staff. If you have new members on staff who weren't around for STAR, or if you feel like you need to level set with everybody in the building again around STAR, you might find those decks to be very helpful. STAR champions also have access to something called Renaissance U. Renaissance U is a repository of all sorts of self-guided training materials. There are directions in the speaker notes for the slide deck for how to get into Renaissance U. That Smart Start is an option where you can it's broken out into different modules that you can kind of pick on what you want to look at, like how to administer the test or how to look at reports, things like that. In the speaker notes, there are also there's a link to an overview document about Renaissance U that walks you through in more detail other features of Renaissance U. There's different courses you can take and things like that. So if you need some assistance with the basics of STAR and you want to do some self-teaching, please take a look at Renaissance U. We also recommend that you take a look at presentations that we did last year. So that link will take you to a place where we have all the slide decks that we did for champions, but also for teachers and also recordings of those. So that might be a great way for you to go back and catch up on some things that we covered in previous years. If you're kind of starting from the basics here. And finally, within the Renaissance system in STAR, they have a really good help menu. It's tied to whatever page you're on in the website. So if you happen to be on a page looking at a report, if you click on that help icon at the top of the page, it's going to give you help information about the report you're looking on. Or if you're on a page for CBMs and administering, it's going to give you help related to that. So it's a good help menu, and we highly recommend you use that as well. So just wanted to share some things for those of you who were hoping to get the basics today. We aren't covering them, but you'll be able to get basics there. And then if you have any follow-up questions, please do reach out to STAR Assessment at PhilSD or your PACER representative, and we're going to share towards the end of the presentation who your PACER reps are by network, so you can follow up with them as well. Okay, let's jump into testing expectations for this year. So these are the 4 testing windows. So we are obviously in the middle of the first testing window here for fall. We have one change this year. We were getting feedback from some schools that felt like the 4 testing windows were too many. So we have made the third window, the Winter 2 window, optional for this year. Now, that still ultimately is going to come down to a decision from your assistant superintendent and or your principal. So the district is saying that window can be optional. If your particular network or school wants to administer it, that's up to your school leadership. But we are saying that that one is optional. Students must take all the required STAR assessments during each of those windows that are of the mandatory windows. And we're going to go over what those required assessments are in the next couple slides. And we just really want to make a plug here too about how it's critical to be participating in those 3 required windows. One of the nice features about STAR is its ability to show growth. And you're not going to be able to show growth for a student if they're not taking those different assessments. We had in the spring administration last year, we saw kind of a noticeable drop off of participation in high schools. And so for those students, they're really missing that ability for you to look and see where did they start the year, where did they finish the year. And that information is helpful not only for individual teachers, but also for you making programmatic decisions to see where do we need to put more resources, or we instituted some new programs this year, how do they work? And not having that beginning to end of year information can really be a detriment to evaluating. So we know it can be challenging to get students to participate at the end of the year, but really want to plug that you're trying as best you can to get students participating in all 3 of those windows. In the speaker notes, we do have a link to the assessment calendar. So if you want to look at other testing information for the year besides STAR, you can go ahead and take a look at the assessment calendar as well. All right. What we're looking at now are the testing requirements for grades K to 2. The CAT, that's the CAT, that's the computer adaptive test. So there's 3 different computer adaptive tests: STAR Early Literacy, STAR Reading, STAR Math. The CBM stands for curriculum-based measures. Those are those 1-minute probes that you're administering one-on-one to students that are for grades K to 5. So want to highlight for you on this screen the differences here between STAR Early Literacy and STAR Reading and STAR Math for students in grades K1 and 2. So the STAR Early Literacy test is designed for students who are not yet independent readers. So STAR has a recommendation that when students reach a scale score of 852 on the STAR Early Literacy test, that would indicate that the student is most likely ready to move to STAR Reading. They're most likely an independent reader and be ready for the STAR Reading and STAR Math test. So we want to recommend for you, if you have first graders or second graders who took STAR last year, and you look back and you can see that their score from the spring window was an 852 or higher, you can start them this year on the STAR Reading test. You don't have to give them the STAR Early Literacy test if they already are near that 852 score. For your kindergartners who don't have a previous STAR score, you should administer the STAR Early Literacy test in the fall. If they score around that 852, then you can consider moving them to STAR Reading and STAR Math in the winter window. We also want to recommend to you that the 852 scale score is not a hard, fast rule. We absolutely want there to be professional discretion by the teachers to determine whether or not a student is an independent reader. You might have a student who scored an 849 and the teacher goes, yeah, that student is definitely, reading independently, they're ready to move on. You might have a student who scores an 855 and the teacher says, yeah, they're really not ready to be reading independently yet. It's a recommendation. It's a place that your teacher should consider. If a student is around 852, then they should really be looking at, are they ready to move to STAR Reading and STAR Math? Also want to address, because we get this question, well, let me pause and let me get to the next slide and then I'll come back on that one. So these are the requirements for grades 3 to 12. So you can see starting in grade 3 that students are required to now take STAR Reading and STAR Math. So you may have 3rd graders or 4th graders or 5th graders or maybe even above, you might have students in these grades who are not independent readers yet. They still have to take and try to take the STAR reading and the STAR math tests. That's for the purpose of tracking for the board. The Board of Education wants us to track all third graders on STAR reading and STAR math. But you may find that you have some upper grade students who aren't able to successfully, really engage that well with the STAR reading test. You are allowed to administer the STAR early literacy test to students in grades 3 or above to get additional information for those students. But you do need to make sure you are administering STAR reading and STAR math first. So if you have a fourth grader who's significantly below grade level, they try STAR reading, you don't get very useful information because the test was a little bit above their ability level, you can go ahead and give them the STAR early literacy so you can get some actionable data for yourself for that student as well. So we get this question a lot. I'm going to say it again. You are allowed to give STAR early literacy for grades 3 and above after you've given STAR reading and STAR math. So, all right, hopefully that's clear there. You can see that CBMs stop for math after grade 3, and you can see they stop for ELA after grade 5. Same thing though, you are allowed to give CBMs off grade level. So if you have fourth graders who still are in need of some foundational math skills, you absolutely can still give them the CBMs for the lower grade levels. Same thing with reading. You have a 7th grader who you know is still struggling with their fluency and you want to use the passage oral reading, that's okay. You're allowed to do that. All right, so those are the requirements. So you certainly can go above and beyond those requirements. This chart here is showing the required CBM measures by grade and by testing window. So you can see kindergarten, these are the ones required for the fall, the winter, the spring, first grade, etc. Remember that the winter 2 window is optional. So if you choose that you're not doing that, great, you can ignore winter 2. But if you are administering winter 2, these would be the CBMs that you'd want to give them. These are the 2nd and 3rd grade CBMs and the 4th through 5th. Okay. So I want to share with you some frequently asked questions and some clarification. So you can see on the slide there, we have a link to an FAQ that we have built out over the years, and we just keep adding questions to it. It's a great way for you to, a resource for you to check. So before you ask a question, you might want to double check there and see if it's already been answered for you. And we do try to update that throughout the year as we get some new frequently asked questions. But we did want to highlight a couple questions that we got last year that were based upon some misconceptions of how the STAR test works. And we wanted to spend a little time talking about those. So one of those misconceptions was that we were told, all right, the STAR CAT, they're not aligned to our district scope and sequence. They're misaligned. So let's address that a little bit here. The STAR tests are assessing skills based upon the National Common Core. So we've aligned the STAR system to report out its skills in the standards that come from the Common Core. And STAR builds a learning progression for each grade, subject, and time of year. So essentially they look at the Common Core for 3rd grade math and they say, okay, what is this progression of skills that a 3rd grader learns for math in 3rd grade? What would they need to know at the beginning of the year, the next, and build a progression for the whole year. So our district scope and sequence is also aligned to the National Common Core. So the scope of the STAR test and the scope of the district are the same. We're looking at the National Common Core and the skills from those. Now, there are some areas of the district's sequence that maybe don't follow the same progression of skills in the Common Core. So there are times when the curriculum team says, we're going to take this particular math skill, which we could teach in the 2nd marking period, but we're actually going to move that to the end of the 3rd marking period. So there are times when things might be out of sequence in our curriculum compared to the Common Core. So it's possible that a student might be assessed on skills on the STAR test that weren't assessed yet in a particular class or school, depending upon the pacing. Well, one of the nice benefits of STAR is that it's an adaptive test, so it adjusts to the level of each individual student. So if a student's given a question on a skill that they haven't learned yet, then the test is going to hone in on what the student has actually mastered. So, they say, okay, we're giving you this question on the skill and you get it wrong. The test is going to say, okay, you got that wrong. Let's drop down. Do you know this? No, you don't know that. All right, let's drop down. And it's going to basically, for each skill, figure out where the student is. So that actually gives us more accurate and complete information on our students than we would have from a fixed form test like the benchmarks we used in the past. So the benchmarks we had in the past were very aligned to our district's scope and sequence because we knew the sequence the district used and we made the test to match that. So that has an advantage of being very aligned to the scope and sequence, but the disadvantage of those fixed form tests is everybody got the same questions at the same level. And one of the most common feedbacks we got about the benchmarks when we were using them is for students who are below grade level, those benchmarks didn't give you a whole lot of useful information because you're like, I know the student can't do these questions. So you give them the benchmark, they're getting them wrong, but that doesn't tell me where they actually are. What do they actually know? But the STAR tests will, because it will adapt to where the students are. So it's not an accurate assessment to say the STAR tests are not aligned to our scope and sequence. They are aligned to the scope. There are some possible times that the sequence might be off, but because it's adaptive, it's going to be able to provide you with more actionable data for what you actually need to do with your students at that time. You also can use the STAR data in some ways as a pretest. So if they did have skills that they weren't taught yet, that they were assessed on STAR, when you get to the point in your curriculum, when you're teaching that skill, you can look at the STAR data and you can say, all right, we didn't teach this yet. What kind of mastery do I have in my class? Who's already mastered that skill that I haven't taught yet? Who hasn't? How many kids are significantly below in that skill? And that informs teachers before they even present a new skill. They can have some information about their students that they wouldn't have otherwise had if we had a fixed form benchmark. So hopefully that addresses that misconception. Another question we got here is that the district should limit the content that the STAR CATs test our students on. So number one, we can't. There is no way for us to adjust the STAR system to say only test these skills and not those. It's just not the way that product is designed, because that would defeat the purpose of what it is. It's an adaptive universal screener. It's supposed to be assessing all students and determining their risk of not being on grade level. And it's going to be looking at testing multiple skills in order to do that. So the test, we can't limit it, and we wouldn't even try it if we could. If you are interested in testing your students on a limited skill, you want everybody to have the same questions on one skill only, you can use the skill checks that are built into STAR. There are 5-question fixed form tests that are on one skill only, and everybody gets the same questions. So you could use the skill checks in conjunction with the adaptive tests if you wanted to be able to really hone in on a specific skill. We're not going to talk about skill checks in this presentation, but in that STAR 102 training deck we referenced earlier, we do talk about how to access skill checks in the STAR system. So that might be a useful tool for you if that's what you're looking for. Another frequently asked question we get a lot at this time of year: how does someone at my school get administrator level access to the Renaissance platform? So in order for somebody to have admin access, they need to be designated as a digital learning coordinator in the RAD system. And your principal is the person who can designate somebody in RAD as a digital learning coordinator. Up to 5 people per school can be a digital learning coordinator. And you absolutely, as a STAR champion, should be one of them. So if you don't have administrator access yet, you need to talk to your principal and have them add you in RAD as a digital learning coordinator. Then it says within 72 hours. It should probably happen much quicker than that. Mostly within 1 day that would happen, but could take a little longer. After that, you would have administrator level access. We do want to note that assistant principals and principals automatically have school-wide access, so they don't need to be listed as a digital learning coordinator in the RAD system. Another question we get a lot this time of year is, how do special ed, EL, and intervention teachers get access to the Renaissance platform? So teachers get access if they are tied to a reading or math class. So you need to talk to your roster chair and they need to schedule the special ed teacher, the EL teacher, whatever. They need to schedule them as a co-teacher to whatever classes you want them to have access to in STAR. So if you want the L teacher to have all of their students who they support, then they would need to be added as a co-teacher to all of the classes that those students are in. We only load math and reading courses for the elementary grades. So science teachers, social studies teachers, etc., will not have access to STAR unless somebody schedules them as a co-teacher to the reading or math class. In grades 9 through 12, we load math classes, English classes, and we also add homeroom classes or advisories in high school, because we know some students aren't in a math class in high school in a particular grade. So by homeroom, that would still allow them to be able to access the STAR math test in the system. So hopefully that explains how you can get everybody who needs access to STAR to get access to STAR. Okay, another frequently asked question that's come up a lot this year is about extended time for students. So first, I want to just start off by apologizing on behalf of Renaissance for the bug in their system that's causing us some challenges with extended time. The way the system was set up was that administrators, people who had administrator level access in STAR, would have the ability to grant extended time to students. And right now there's a bug in the Renaissance system that you can do like the first 2 or 3 steps, but then when you get to the 3rd step, you just get this spinning wheel and it won't let you go any further. So we had sent out an email last, I don't remember if it was this week or last week, where we informed you that we changed the setting so that teachers can now add extended time. And that was done because administrators don't have the ability to do it right now. We don't know yet when that bug is going to get fixed from Renaissance. They are actively working on it, and we have let them know that this is really important for us that it gets fixed. But in the meantime, if somebody needs extended time, it's going to have to be the classroom teacher who does it. If you are a classroom teacher and you're also an admin, so if you are STAR champion on this call, but you also teach a 7th grade class, you are a school administrator in the Renaissance system, so you won't be able to do extended time, even though you're also a teacher. So the only workaround I have at this point for that is you'd have to roster another teacher who's not an admin to your class, and that teacher would have to go in and do extended time for your students until the bug is fixed. So I know that's not ideal, but that would be a workaround for how you could get extended time. Okay, so now that we've talked about all that, how do you actually do it in the system? When you have the right permissions and access, you would click on your name in the upper right corner. You would get this drop down and click on Edit Preferences. Then you would scroll down to this Individual Student Preferences section and pick the Extended Question Time Limits. You have to do this by class. You pick a class, and then you'd select the student that you want to give extended time to. And then for those students, you have to pick which test you want to give them extended time for. So it's a little bit of an involved process with some clicking, but the nice thing is once it is set for a student, that setting will stay for the entire school year, and it should carry over from year to year. So if you set extended time limits for students last year, they should already have it in the system this year. I have heard anecdotally there are some times that it doesn't carry over. I don't know exactly why. For some students it doesn't, but for most students it does carry over year to year. And for all students, it does stay for the entire school year. So once you set it, it's good. You don't need to go back and change it unless you're removing that option for them. Do you want to also make a reminder that the only students who should be getting extended time are students who have in their IEP an allowable accommodation for extended time on testing. You should not be giving extended time to students who it's not specified in their IEP. By giving extended time to students, you actually can affect the accuracy of the data from the STAR test. Without getting too much in the weeds here, STAR is a normed reference test. So a lot of the data points we get from STAR, like percentile rank, the benchmark categories, things like that, it's based upon normed data. So when the STAR was field testing this, they had tens of thousands of students taking STAR tests without extended time. and they based their okay, kids scored this way, and they did all their calculations for percentile ranks and things like that based upon kids who were not having extended time. Once you start allowing students to have extended time, they're now deviating from that norm group. So the accuracy of some of the percentile ranks and benchmark categories could be impacted by students getting extended time, especially if it's unnecessary. So we're not telling you not to do extended time for kids with IEPs. Go ahead and do that, but don't give extended time to students if it's not specified in their IEP. All right. We often got this question around, is STAR related to PSSA and Keystone? Or people telling us it's not related to the PSSA or Keystone. So we finally had a year where we were able to have a normal, I'll say, administration of PSSA and Keystone. So last year we had full PSSA data, full Keystone data, and we were able to then compare that to STAR data. This is preliminary. We still have our research team doing a much more in-depth analysis, but we wanted to share with you some of these initial results of how the STAR test is correlated to the PSSA and Keystone. So to talk about correlation for a second here, right? A correlation expresses the linear relationship between two variables, and it can range from as low as a -1, which is the strongest negative correlation, to a +1, which is the strongest positive relation. It's linear, which means it's correlated. Like if one goes up, does the other go up? If one goes down, does the other go down? So a correlation of 0.7 or greater is considered a strong correlation. And you can see here some initial breakdown that we have. STAR reading scores have a 0.77 correlation to the PSSA ELA and 0.73 to the Keystone literature. STAR math 0.73 to PSSA math and 0.71 to Keystone algebra. So there are strong correlations between the STAR tests and the PSSA and Keystone, which is what we expected, and is really good to see that we can have faith that when we are seeing STAR scores, that's going to give us a good indication of how the students are going to do on the PSSA or Keystone. Now, I do want to say here, we are not saying this is a predictive test with a one-to-one relationship for everybody. So not every single student who scores at or above is going to get advanced or proficient. Not every student who gets on watch is going to be basic. There are going to be some kids who scored on watch on STAR who will get proficient or advanced on PSSA. You're going to have some kids who scored at or above on STAR and get basic on the Keystone. But the majority of students are going to have that correlation in play for them. So you can use those STAR scores if you're administering those tests with fidelity. It will give you a good indication of how those students are going to perform on their state tests. I do want to again say that there's going to be more detailed reports coming where we're going to have kind of grade by grade breakdowns and correlations and things like that. We're also going to try to include, if there's areas where there's a discrepancy, see if we can figure out why, so we can continue to improve the utility of this data. So one more slide on this, just to show you here, again, some real preliminary results, but we looked at the percent of students who got at or above on STAR and the percent of students who got proficient advanced on PSSA or Keystone. So you can see for PSSA, in STAR, we had about 29% advanced proficient and about 34% advanced proficient on the PSSA. So close numbers there. In math, we had 19% get at or above on STAR and 16% get proficient or advanced on PSSA. So again, pretty close numbers there. For Keystone, you can see here a little bit wider gaps, the 30 and the 41 and the 23 and the 17. I will say one thing that we know right now, that in this preliminary analysis, it wasn't looking at a matched student data set. So some of you are like, I'm getting into the weeds here, and you can just tune this out if you want. But basically what we're saying is this analysis didn't say only show me kids who took both STAR and PSSA or Keystone. So these numbers are going to shift a little bit when we're able to do that analysis a little bit more. But we did want to share at least some of this initial findings so you can see that how closely related the tests are. We also want to use this as a way to illustrate a point that we were making last year. We got some questions last year of why did the district change the at or above cut score for math? It used to be 40th percentile rank, right? So for reading, if you get a 40th percentile, you are at or above. And 2 years ago in math, it was the same. But then last year, we moved the math score to 70th percentile. We said, we're finding that 40th percentile for math is not matching what we would expect it to with PSSA. So we upped it to 70th percentile. And you can see now that that decision was the right one in terms of how related it is to the PSSA and Keystone. If we had kept the math percentile rank cut score at 40%, we would have had a far greater number of students who would have been scoring at or above on STAR, but would not have been on PSSA. So the decision to move to the 70th percentile rank has played out in the data to be a good decision to make sure that we are more accurately using the STAR data at what classifies a student as being at or above. All right, there was a lot on that topic, but the one takeaway from that is they're correlated, so have faith in the STAR data and more details coming. All right. So before I jump into product updates, I want to just pause for a second. And Joe, are there any things that from the chat that I need to address?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any FAQs being asked. So
cool, great. Okay, so there's some new features in STAR that we wanted to highlight for you. And the first is there are now Spanish CBMs. So we have been using the English CBMs for grades K to 5. There are now 4 CBMs that are for Spanish. I want to be very clear that these are not translations of the English CBMs. So they didn't take the English one and just translate it into Spanish and call it a Spanish CBM. Renaissance has a unique learning progression for Spanish. The way students learn to read and speak Spanish versus English is different. There are different skills that are unique to Spanish or unique to English. So these CBMs are customized for Spanish and based upon their learning progression for Spanish-speaking students. They're available now. If you don't speak Spanish, that first one is basically letter combinations. Second one is simple syllable words. Compound syllable words is the third one. And the fourth one would be basically passage oral reading. So those are the Spanish CBMs. And this chart will show you which CBMs should be given by grade and time of year. For dual language schools, you are required to give your students both the English and the Spanish CBMs. For non-dual language schools, you do need to give the English ones, and if you want to also give Spanish, you can. You're not required to give Spanish if you're not dual language, but it is optional. You still need to make sure you give them the English ones. The STAR Spanish CBM tests are relatively new, so they don't have complete norming data on them yet. So what that means is if you're administering this test, any one of these tests outside of these seasons, you're not going to have norm data. So let me show you what that would look like. So right now, our English CBMs have 3 benchmark categories. Our Spanish ones right now only have 2. Eventually they'll have 3, but right now you're either at or above if you're 40th percentile or above, or your intervention if you're below 40th percentile. If a student takes a Spanish CBM, either at a grade or a time period where there isn't normed data, they're going to get this gray box in the record book. So the green means at or above, the red means intervention. Gray means, hey, that test for that student wasn't normed for that time of year. So the number in there is the correct per minute. So you're still going to get a correct per minute score. You can still go look at the students' responses to see what did they get right, what did they get wrong, but you won't have the benefit of knowing a percentile rank or knowing their benchmark category. you will sometimes see this green check mark. And what that is saying, it's saying, okay, you gave this test to a first grader at a time of year that it doesn't exist of norm data doesn't exist for the first grader, but it does exist for kindergartner. So we have norm data for kindergartners, but we don't have it for first grade. If the first grader hit the cut score for at or above for a kindergartner in the spring, then they get this green check mark. So it basically says you have a student who hit what would be the at or above benchmark for the grade level that test was meant for. So that would be a way of saying, all right, a kindergartner should be here by the end of spring. You have a first grader who took it and they basically hit that score where the kindergartner would need to be at the end of spring. That's what the green check mark means. Okay, so there are more details on the Spanish CBMs. I think we have something in the chat, actually not in the chat, in the speaker notes for that. I'm just double checking my notes real quick here. Yeah, we linked, well, I linked the participation guidelines from the English learners. So that's, we get that question a lot. If people want to see what are the guidelines for English learners and dual language learners, which tests do they have to take in English, which tests they have to take in Spanish, we have that document linked in the speaker notes. Okay, so that's one new feature in STAR. Another one we're super excited about is a student report that is coming the end of this month. So one of the real deficiencies we felt like in the STAR system was that there was no student-facing report. There wasn't a way for a student to go get their own information. Renaissance also recognized this was a need, so we've been working with them on developing this report. And you can see here a mock-up of what the student report's going to look like. So a couple key features. There's the ability to see scores across multiple windows. So you can see three windows here in this example. You have a line graph that shows how the student is progressing. And you can also see how they're progressing against their grade level benchmark. You're going to get some simplified growth scores here of a low, medium, or high. And then you have the ability to turn off different things. You can choose to have the instructional reading level and the SGP. You can also choose to have these domain level scores show or not show. If you have it all on, there's obviously a lot of information that the student can get about their performance on STAR. And we want to let you know too that we actually had a focus group of Philadelphia students who met. It was either this late spring, early summer, and we brought them in and we asked them a lot of questions about STAR and what did they know about it? What questions do they have about their scores? What would they like to see? When would they like to see it? And Renaissance was participated in that. So a lot of the feedback was incorporated directly into this report. So I'm not trying to say that Philadelphia made this report, but Philadelphia had a lot of input into this report. So we think it's going to be very useful for our students. And we highly encourage you, when this is available, to share these reports with students and then start having some data conversations with them. It's going to increase their ownership of their test results. We've heard anecdotally from some students who were looking at it that there were some students who, when they saw their scores, they're like, oh, this is really low. Yeah, I didn't really try. Now I need to try. Or you can have conversations around, hey, let's look at these domain scores. Here's some areas where you're struggling. Here's some areas where you're doing well. Let's look at your previous test to this one. Look where you grew. So there are a lot of benefits to being able to share this data with the students. So we hope that this will be something you use. We are planning in the next few weeks or months to try to give maybe some best practices around having some of these data conversations with students. But for now, know that this is coming and it will be ready in time for the end of our screening window. So when everybody's done testing, you can start having some of those data conversations. This report may, for those of you who are used to the family report, it's basically we took the family report and kind of the student report is a kind of a pared down, or excuse me, the student report's a souped up version here. The family report is something that's been in existence, and we plugged this a lot last year. So if you aren't aware, there is a way to generate a report that you can share with families. And we did a whole slide deck and presentation on that before, which is linked here. You can see. So if you are not familiar with the parent report, please take a look at that. We highly recommend that you share this with your families. It can be a great way to engage your parents. It can be something used at parent-teacher conferences, things like that. Last year, we also did a lot of push to try to get you to make sure your school websites had a link to our Office of Assessment website, where there's directions for how parents can get on Home Connect. Home Connect is a way that a parent can basically sign up to get emails when their students take STAR tests, and they can get results directly to their emails. So it's a great way to engage your parents, keep them informed, and have some good conversations with them about their students' performance. So if you're not using these and it's not linked to your website, we highly encourage you to take a minute to look at these resources and figure out how to access these tests and how to start having some conversations with parents. Okay. Other things coming to the STAR platform, they have released a lot of accommodations for visually impaired students. So you would be able to set these preferences the same way you would go to do extended time would be how you would get to these. But just to show, I'm not going to read this list, but these are all different accommodations that are available to students. So we're really excited that these are available. These are very familiar to, well, similar to accommodations they would have in other programs of this type. So please do take a look if you have students who have some of these things specified in their IP. We're now able to provide them on the STAR test as well. I do want to point out in the speaker notes that we have two resources that will help you with these accommodations. So one is just a help file, which will kind of show you how do you turn these on for students. But there's also then a video that shows what they look like from the student experience. And we think that would be something that would be important for you to share with students before they take the STAR test, right? So they're not going to necessarily know how to use all of these accommodations. If you just turn it on and don't tell them anything about it, they won't know they're there or what to do with them. So you can use that video to show them, here, look, if you choose this line reader, this is what pops up on the screen, and you can move it around. And if you want to be able to, cross out your response masking, like this is what it would look like. So that video could be a really helpful tool to use with students to make sure they know how to use these tools for the STAR test. We also have news from STAR that there are going to be Braille versions of the CBMs coming at the end of this month. Which is really exciting for our students who previously weren't able to do the CBMs because they needed it in Braille. So there will be PDF, or not PDF, there'll be these .brf files that can be downloaded, and then you need a Braille printer to print out these English versions of the CBMs in Braille. Again, it's only available for the English CBMs right now. They are working on Braille for the Spanish CBMs, but that we don't know when those are coming yet. When we get some more information from Renaissance about the exact rollout of this, we'll share it with you as well. I know this doesn't apply to most of our students, but for those of you who have some students at Braille, we are happy that we're able to now be more inclusive. Okay, another change to the STAR platform. There's a new CBM data insight tile. So previously there were 3 CBM data insights. The new one that's coming is called how many students were assessed on at least one measure. And what this allows you to do is look at participation by each class for each individual CBM. So you can pick one at a time and look and see how many people did it. We know that right now we track participation of the official participation numbers from the district are in CLIC, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But you can use this participation tile in STAR to get real-time data, so it's not going to need an overnight refresh. When the kid finishes the test, it's in a couple seconds later it'll populate in the system. So this is will be a useful tool if you want to just see, all right, for a particular class, how many kids still need to take letter naming, or how many kids still need to take addition to 10, something like that. So it's an additional CBM data insight tile that is available now for tracking participation. And I am going to turn it over to Joe to talk about looking at participation in CLIC. Before I do that, Are there any chat questions we need to address on any of those new features?
No, I think we've been able to hit each question point by point. So, and again, I don't think there's been anything that's been kind of recurring in terms of questions. So
Great. Okay. Well, then we'll just take a second for Joe to share his screen, and he's going to walk you through the rest here.
awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. And to everybody on here, I apologize. I'm about to go into slideshow mode. I know that kind of messes up everybody else's screens temporarily. While this is loading, so we wanted to start out by talking a little bit about tracking participation in Click. Like Jeff was just talking about, there's nice updates, enhancements to the CBM data insights that allow you to track CBMs in the STAR platform. But we wanted to talk about tracking participation at Click too, because I know that our SBTLs just recently for the first time received Click access, which is very exciting. So we just want to give you a very quick look at how you could see some key information around participation inside of Click. For the record, we are hoping at some point there might be a possibility, not today or tomorrow, but in the not too distant future, to get all STAR champions Click access, regardless of whether or not you are an SBTL. But that's something that's still being discussed and worked on. One other thing I want to note about Click, the good thing about going into Click to track participation and other things is you can get school level data roll up. So we know in the STAR platform, you can't really get that easily. You have to look at grade by grade, and then you might have to do some math yourself. The nice thing is Click will roll that data up to give you school level participation rates. The one drawback of Click, you can't actually go in and see individual student level data. So you can't go into Click to see who of your students has or has not participated. You can merely get, averages across the school or across a grade, but you can't get individual students. You also can't get it by classroom. You won't see individual teachers' names listed in Click. So just wanted to kind of give you the heads up, because you're going to want to track participation likely across both platforms, STAR and Click. To access Click, I know our SBTLs, I believe you were sent a link that you can use to access Click. But typically, and certainly at some point, you'll get a tile on the district single sign-on page, what people refer to as the Hollywood Squares. There's the Click benchmarking, analytics, and management application here. So you're going to want to select that. When you click on this Click tile, you'll arrive in a new window on the Click homepage for our district, and you'll notice that there's a number of different applications. There's a climate application that you can click on to go see suspension and attendance data. There's a course marks application that allows you to see student grades, and for our high school folks, on track rates. A lot of good stuff there. There's also an academic screeners app. This is where you'll find your STAR data. So that's where, if you want to see some STAR data in Click, you're going to want to click on academic screeners. When you click on academic screeners, it will automatically take you to the key performance indicators page, or sheet as they're called. This is the first sheet within the academic screeners app in Click. So it's kind of the academic screeners homepage. What you'll notice is there's a few different KPIs, these key performance indicator metrics, that are listed. For both reading and math, you can see right up front the percentage of your students who have scored at or above benchmark, and that's school-wide. And this is on the computer adaptives. The data you're seeing in Click in the KPI page is always going to be the computer adaptives. So you have your at or above benchmark scores. You also have your participation scores. Couple quick important notes. Participation for reading, like we said, is based entirely on completing the computer adaptive test. That's STAR early literacy for those students who take that, and STAR reading, for our somewhat older students. For math, for 3 to 12, participation is based on did you complete the STAR Math computer adaptive test? For K-2, it's based on CBM participation, and specifically, did your students complete all required CBMs for K-2? So for each individual student, that's what the system considers. Did I, Joe Taylor, as a kindergartner, take the required CBMs for math for kindergarten? If I did, I'm counted as participating. So I just wanted to flag that. The other important thing to note is when you arrive on the KPI homepage, the data you're seeing is for our district. This is district-wide data. So this is how Click is a little bit different than some of the other platforms you might have access to, like SchoolNet. You're not limited to just looking at your school. You could see other schools, you could see for your network, you could see across the district. And so the first thing you're going to want to do if you want to see your data is come to the top left-hand corner here, and for school name, you're going to use the filter here to select your school. You know, all 215 plus the alternatives and whatnot come up on the dropdown. So you'll want to start typing in the name of your school, and you'll see it'll come to the top of the list. So again, you'll probably want to go back and forth to check, oh, how's the district do and how do we compare to the district? You're more than welcome to do that, but just make sure you're always setting that filter for your school if you want to look at your own data. There's other filters up top here that you could see. You know, certainly one I want to draw attention to is assessment cycle, because, you know, you might be in the winter looking at your participation data, and you might say, you know what, I want to go back and look at how we did with participation in the fall. You would choose the assessment cycle filter and select fall from there. Additionally, in the far right-hand corner, there's 3 dots. These 3 dots, if you click on them, will take you to a page that has a bunch of other filters available for you, a new window. So other filters include race, ethnicity, grade level, gender, ELS status, SPED status. So you can cut through this data in all sorts of ways, and you could set multiple filters. You can look for females who have an IEP, things like that. So it's really great for you guys to have access to this, and you can really use the filters to slice through the data in any way that interests you. Another thing that's wonderful about the Academic Screeners app is that the data is updated on a daily basis. Now there's a 1-day lag. So if your students tested today, let's assume tomorrow wasn't Friday, it's a normal work day. When you come in tomorrow, sometime in the morning, that data will be updated from the previous day. So it doesn't update in real time, it kind of updates the following morning. But you could see there's always a date listed that tells you data through, you know, whenever the last refresh was. So this is nice if your principal's asking you, hey, can you tell me the latest participation data? You could say to them, yeah, as of the end of the school day yesterday, here's where we're at. So wanted to flag that. The last thing, because again, we know there's some folks on here who unfortunately do not have Click access yet. There are other sheets within this Academic Screeners app. There's actually quite a few, but again, we don't want to get into providing a whole Click training here today. But if you'd like to explore more, you can use the directional arrows right and left, and it'll take you to all kinds of different pages. And this button right next to those directional arrows is actually a drop down with the menu of all the sheets that are provided within this Academic Screeners app. So there's a lot around performance, participation. If you want to look at disproportionality data, there's just a lot of great stuff in here. And the last thing I'll say before we kind of move on from Click is we have been in contact with the folks from academics who work with the SBTL. So Amy Suma, Catherine Clever, Jill Stevenson, to talk about setting up some Click 101 sessions, so that for folks who would like to kind of learn more about how to navigate Click, the different functions and filters and all that, we can take you through that. So more training is coming, but again, today we just wanted to do a little quick and dirty. Here's how you can get some participation data really easily in the system. And if you have questions, please drop them in the chat box. We have team members who are very comfortable with Click who can respond to this. And I just want to be clear again, because we went over this in the morning and then somebody emailed the folks who oversee Click with a little bit of a slight misunderstanding. If you are not an SBTL, we don't have this access for you yet, but we're working to make it happen. So that's the only thing I wanted to reiterate. But you can't send an email and say, can I have it? I'm a STAR champion. That's not how the access is granted at the moment. It only went out to SBTLs. So we're hoping to kind of catch people who are in other positions that also serve as STAR champions. But bear with us on that. We'll keep you posted. Great. So next, we want to just do a quick little bit around progress monitoring guidance. We've had some schools already reach out around progress monitoring guidance, which is great because it's telling us people want to hit the ground running after administering the fall screener. So we appreciate that. There are a couple of tweaks to the progress monitoring guidance that we want to go over. So for K-5 reading and K-3 math, progress monitoring guidance is virtually the same as last year. And you are required to progress monitor with CBMs. And this is the case even if you're using online adaptive programs. And we mentioned that because for 6 to 12 reading and 4 to 12 math, if you're progress monitoring students with an online adaptive program, such as an iReady, Achieve 3000, Lexia, Learning A to Z, Imagine Math, then progress monitoring with the STAR computer adaptives is optional. But again, that only applies to 6 to 12 reading and 4 to 12 math. So again, if you're progress monitoring students with an online adaptive in those grades, then progress monitoring with the STAR computer adaptive tests is optional. We would say talk to your principal. Your principal might want to talk to your assistant superintendent. But this is where things stand from district guidance standpoint. But we know, some principals may want to continue using the STAR computer adaptives for progress monitoring in those grades.
Joe?
Yeah.
I just want to make a plug here for everybody that we made this adjustment based upon feedback that we got from the field that people were saying, hey, why are we having to progress monitor both systems? So we just want to use this as a plug for when we put these surveys in the presentations and we ask for your feedback. We do look at it. We do consider them seriously. Sometimes it might take longer to implement some of these changes than we'd like, but just be mindful that if there's feedback that you have for things that you'd like to see that we can improve, we do look at it. And this is just one example of us trying to be responsive. So, and Barbara, I see in the chat, I'm glad you're happy.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Definitely. Please, as many times as you can fill out surveys and feedback forms to share your point of view. That really helps us out. So thank you. I want to go back real quick. So yeah, we just want to note, we do have linked here our guidance from last year. So if you are using STAR to progress monitor, whether it's the CBMs or the CATs, the guidance largely remains the same, with the exception of a small tweak around goal setting, and that's what we're going to talk about next.
Joe? Yeah. I'm sorry, one other thing here. I do want to clarify that when we're saying for those grades that Joe was just saying that you can choose to progress monitor with either the online adaptive or with STAR, we are asking that whichever you pick, you stick with that for the year. So don't change back and forth between the two. To be effective as a progress monitoring tool, you should be using the same progress monitoring tool throughout the year. So if you are choosing to not progress monitor with STAR for those grades, fine. Just keep using the adaptive all year. If you're choosing to use STAR and not the adaptive, fine. That's okay. Just pick one and keep with it the whole year for those ones where you have the exception.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
So like we said, no major changes, but one area where we're seeing some smaller changes is around goal setting. So in this section, I'm going to talk about goal setting for two areas. Number one, we're going to talk about goal setting as it relates to progress monitoring. So, the goal setting that we do within the STAR platform. Then I'm going to shift to talking about goal setting for the SPMs, because we had Educator Effectiveness reach out to us about, providing some guidance around helping teachers to set, quote unquote, like a SMART goals in Cornerstone for their SPMs. And so, because we have a lot of schools, and this is a great thing, using STAR for SPMs. So we wanted to really kind of take the bull by the horns, develop some robust guidance, and go over that with you. And we'll also talk a little bit about how we can further support you in, facilitating that SPM goal setting with your teachers. But to start, we're going to look at goal setting for progress monitoring in the STAR platform itself. So one change we're making is as it relates to setting goals for the computer adaptive tests. And remember, we recommend when it comes to the computer adaptive tests, it's a good idea to set a goal for all of your students if you're using that for your progress monitoring tool, because STAR has a progress monitoring version of the computer adaptive tests, of STAR Reading and STAR Math, that is, an abbreviated version of those universal screening tests. But the only way students have access to that is if they have a goal set for them in the system. So that's why we do kind of recommend going in and setting a goal for each student, because you may have students who, are not required to progress monitor in the fall, but unfortunately they fall behind in the winter. And now at this point, you don't have to go in and reset goals. You've set goals for them already. They'll have access. So one of the changes we're making, last year for type of goal, we selected SGP. This year for type of goal, we're going to choose Scaled Score Unified. And the reason we're doing that is because it actually opens up a few more features within the progress monitoring reports that we look at. So we figured, let's go with Scaled Score Unified. And you'll notice below, we actually still wind up getting to select a goal based on the SGP score. But the way it works, it'll take the student's baseline fall scaled score, and then a goal will be set based on, okay, if you want to make a moderate growth gain across the year of, a 50 SGP, here's the scaled score you'll need to be at different intervals throughout the year. I did get a question from somebody in the last session. What if I already went in and set the goals this year for my school using SGP? Do I need to delete those? The answer is no. We did it this way because, like we said, we want to improve the functionality of the progress monitoring report. There's a little bit more you get out of it by doing it this way. But if you already set it for SGP, that's not a problem. So I just want to make that clear. For goal start and end dates, we're still going to do the entirety of the school year. For the computer adaptive, like we said, this way it keeps the progress monitoring version of the assessment available to students throughout the year. Just as a reminder, the progress monitoring version is only available to students outside of our district testing windows. Otherwise, they still get the full length test. So you could progress monitor, but they're going to get the full length test. For name the goal or intervention, we always recommend just put the year and the section name in there. Select student activities that apply. We recommend checking off everything because, hey, we'll take all data points in that progress monitoring report because it's just helpful to kind of get more data listed there to get a better sense of the students' trends and performance. And then for any of our students who are scoring in strategic, on watch, or at or above benchmark, we're recommending a moderate 50 SGP goal. Once you choose that, you click apply. You'll note that I did not mention our intensive intervention students. And these are the students that have to be progress monitored. Our intensive intervention students, we conducted some research here at the central office and found that students in intensive intervention need to make high growth typically, which is a 65 SGP or above, to move into strategic intervention. And so with that in mind, what we're recommending is to set goals that are slightly higher for your intensive intervention students. And this is, again, when we're talking about on the CAT. So for those students, we're recommending setting a moderately ambitious goal with a 65 SGP. Jeff, anything that needs to be addressed here based on questions in the chat?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Did you?
So then we're going to.
Did you cover dates, date ranges?
Yes. Yeah, we said for the computer adaptive year long.
Great. Okay.
So now we're going to pivot to CBMs, and here for the CBMs, we're specifically talking about setting goals at grade level. So if you're setting a grade level CBM goal for your students, the guidance is really going to remain the same as we had from last year, which is, for our students who are in that red intervention group, what we want to do is make sure that we're, when possible, choosing a goal that is moving that student out of that red intervention group and into the blue on watch group. So with the example we have here, for this student, we would recommend choosing the ambitious goal because we could see the moderate goal keeps that student in that red intervention group. You'll note that there's the custom option. We largely kind of recommend staying away from the custom option. And one thing we certainly don't recommend is setting a custom goal that's above ambitious. So you might say, you know what, I want to set a goal that aligns with the cut score for at or above benchmark. We do not recommend that. And that's because, based on research, a student's growth rate can only be so high before we get into the realm of the goal not being attainable. So we really don't want to go above this ambitious goal here. But we do want to note a kind of a neat feature. We could see here the ambitious, they're telling you would be an 84 CPM. You might feel like, wow, that seems like a little bit of a high bar. Well, looking down at this note here, Renaissance is going to tell you, if we're talking about a grade level CBM, what score is needed to get to on watch. So actually 80 would get the student to on watch. So if you were so compelled, you could set a custom goal for 80, because that would be setting a goal to move that student into the on watch category. So in this case, we'd be all right from that. But in general, they give pretty good options, and we recommend selecting a goal that moves the student out of that red intervention group. The last thing I'll note here, then we could pause again for a second. Sometimes if a student scores really low on a CBM, the two goals that are recommended by Renaissance are both still going to be in that red intervention. If that's the case, then we would just recommend that you choose the ambitious goal of the two. Again, we don't want you to set a custom goal above that ambitious goal. It's likely not going to be attainable. So that is our recommendation there. Again, this is for grade level CBM goal setting. If you have to go off grade level, all of that guidance is in our progress monitoring slide deck, which was linked a couple slides before this. So we just didn't want to get that in depth because we don't want this to be a strict progress monitoring session. We will offer some progress monitoring sessions once we kind of head out of the first window, where we can dive into that stuff a little bit more. I'll pause again. Jeff, any questions or anything you want to add here?
Nope, good so far.
Okay. Great.
Hold on a second. I'm getting another question about progress monitoring dates. So setting them for the whole year.
Oh, yeah. Can I speak to this, Jeff, actually, because we just had an email about this. So something that you'll want to consult, and this is in the guidance. So you'll notice in the guidance, it says to set your CBM progress monitoring date for the first window, the first part of the year, till November 30th. And somebody pointed out, well, we're not opening winter one testing until January. Shouldn't I set the progress monitoring goal until January? The reason we're telling you to do it to end that goal for November 30th is that on December 1st, the Renaissance system shifts from fall to winter. And what that means is all the cut scores required are going to shift, and that bar to be considered at or at or above benchmark or on watch is going to increase for the CPMs. So that's why we're actually saying, hey, for the first marking period, essentially for that first screening window and then the subsequent progress monitoring, set your goal just until November 30th. And then if you want to keep progress monitoring in December, I would say reevaluate your goals, see where your students are at, because you'll see the recommendations will change because the cut scores have changed in the STAR system. So that's why we're kind of having dates that might seem like they don't align with our own testing windows. Jeff, that's what you were kind of going to speak to, is that right?
Yes, and making a distinction between CBM dates and CAT dates.
Yes.
Because we said for the computer adaptive goals, you can make that for the whole year. For the CBMs, we're recommending you follow the dates that are in the slide deck that Joe just explained.
Yeah, and once again, as we get closer to progress monitoring, because really the fall window has only been open for 4 days, but as we kind of move out of September, we'll look to set some stuff up, and you can always, of course, reach out to your PESO rep and ask them to either do a call with you or even sit down with your teachers and to go over, the progress monitoring guidance, because I know for CBMs it's a bit more complicated. Anything else here, Jeff?
No, I think we're okay.
And so Tricia, to that point, you could set a goal till the end of the year, but it's not going to be effective because the ambitious goal like that we see right here on the screen, what's ambitious for fall is not going to be the same as what's ambitious for spring because the cut scores shift. So where the students need to be with their CPM scores to be considered at or above benchmark and on watch is going to shift. So that's why we highly recommend that you do not set a year-long CBM goal, and that instead you set a goal that's just to the end of the Renaissance windows. And like we said, those dates are listed in the progress monitoring slide deck. And I can tell you for sure, the first one we have listed is November 30th.
And I also do, to add on that, I really, it would be pretty, how do I say? I don't know with the CBM that I would set a year-long goal, even if we ignored what Joe just said, because you're looking at a very discrete skill. I would hope if you're progress monitoring with letter sounds that's not taking all year long, right? With the CATs, that's a year-long thing, but with these individual discrete foundational skills, if you aren't moving a student from, let's say again, letter sounds from the entire year, you might want to really reconsider the intervention program that's being used, right? Like CBM shouldn't have year-long progress monitoring goals.
I understand what you're saying, but you're talking about, Joe was just mentioning if the goal for both is in the red for such a short period of time, which we're talking about the growth rate, right, for moderate, even on the example you're showing is 1.1. And then for ambitious is 1.9 a week. I understand what you're saying, but it's not the end of the wet window that we're using at the end of November, and asking teachers to then reevaluate even before the next testing window is just, it is a lot of managerial work for teachers to go in and do that. And at many of our schools, it's not just a few students who need to be progress monitored like that. So we're talking about compounding the work across many students. So I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying in terms of these are the kinds of things we need to pay attention to much more often. And they do need our attention. And what I'm also saying is setting them to need to be reset in December, which is even before the testing window closes, just is a lot of work for teachers. And so I'm just trying to minimize that and be as practical as I can be.
Yes.
About what is actually going to look like on the ground for teachers to do this work in a practical, reasonable, sustainable way. So that's the reason for my question. I appreciate that many of these issues need our attention much more often. And I guess what I'm saying is, in order to maximize teacher attention to actually working with students, I want them to be tending to the administrative work as little as possible. So that's the reason for
Yes.
my question.
No, I understand, and I am sympathetic to the workload that is involved, especially if you have a lot of students who are doing that. They would be checking in. You mentioned it's changing in December is before the next testing window, but they're supposed to be progress monitoring every 2 weeks with CBMs, right? So you would be getting data points all along the way. That doesn't still minimize the work involved. I understand that to go in and change it, but because of the way the benchmarks changed, you'd start to be looking at some inaccurate things if you're not changing them. It's not going to be the end of the world if you set it a year-long goal and you don't change it. It's not going to change the fact that the student is still getting intervention and should still be improving. So I'm going to let you choose, knowing you have the information, the advantages and disadvantages of doing it both ways, when looking both at how the system is going to be calculating the numbers and looking at the work involved. And if you're informed, you're going to make the best decision for your school and your teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. So next, what we're going to do, we want to shift now. We talked about goal setting for within the STAR platform. And again, that's for our individual students. And that was really kind of in support of the progress monitoring process. We're now shifting away from that. So we're still talking about goal setting, but now we're talking about goal setting for the for teachers for those student performance measures, AKA the SPMs. So again, we talked with educator effectiveness. They really asked us to support with putting together some guidance because so many of our schools are using STAR to set these SPMs, which we think is great. We're really happy about that. So just to be clear here, these are just recommendations. These are not firm guidelines that your teachers have to follow. We are, again, just trying to help facilitate the creation of smart, SPM goals. So I can't stress that enough. Nobody is enforcing that this guidance be used. So to begin, for our teachers of grades K-2, we recommend using the CBMs to set goals for ELA and for math. For teachers of grade 3, you can determine whether you prefer to set goals using the CBMs or the CATs for ELA or for math. And then for teachers of grades 4 to 12, we recommend using the CATs to set goals for both ELA and for math. And again, I can't stress enough, recommend. We're going to go over 2 things coming up. In terms of our recommendation, can be broken into 2 parts. There are goal statements that we recommend using, and this is just recommended language for writing, just kind of nice, clean, succinct goals. And then there's also target recommendations. So we're going to tell you, based on a review of district-wide data from last year for both the CATs and the CBMs, looking at changes in student performance from fall to spring, essentially, how much growth is reasonable? What makes sense when you're thinking about setting an SPM goal for your class from fall to spring? So for SPM goal setting, we'll start by talking about the CBMs here. There are essentially 2 types of goals that we would encourage your teachers to write. One, they could write a goal that's focused on increasing the percentage of students in their class who are scoring at or above benchmark. Or 2, they could write a goal that's focused on reducing the percentage of students in their class who are scoring in that intensive intervention category. So we keep it really simple, not bring on watch into this, just focus on either increasing at or above or reducing intensive intervention. And so you could see we have the stems here. All that needs to be plugged in would be the CBM name that they're focusing on, the fall score. So that's going to be your baseline score that's based on how your students actually performed in this first window. and then where you want to be in the spring. And we'll go over in a minute the tables for that. So for both the increasing at or above benchmark and the reducing intensive intervention for reading and math, we have suggestions. And again, like I said, these suggestions were based on looking at district-wide trends in terms of student growth from fall to spring for each of these CBMs from last year. And we'll go over the CATs in a minute as well. So you can see our example at the bottom. If I'm a kindergarten teacher who wants to write an SPM goal based on the letter naming CBM, then what I would do is first I'll plug in that letter naming CBM into which CBM I'm focused on. Then what I'll need to do, I'll go into my data and how did we perform in the fall? Okay, 50% of my students scored at or above benchmark in the fall. So I'll insert that there. So what is reasonable growth from fall to spring? Well, if you consult the table, you'll see that for kindergarten, for letter naming, shooting for a 5 to 10 percentage point increase from fall to spring would be in line with what we saw in our district data from last year. Again, these are recommendations. Your teachers, your principal, people might say, you know what, let's try to shoot a little bit higher than that. We want to kind of try to be out in front of the district average. But again, this is what we saw in the data. So that's where this recommendation is coming from. So you can see 5 to 10 points was the district average in terms of change. So that's what we recommend, going from 50 to 60. You can see we have the same thing for math. We went with multiplication to 100. That only applies to third grade. The recommendation is to increase by 15 to 20 points. So if this school started by scoring at 30% in the fall, a goal around 45 to 50% is what we would recommend for the spring. So again, the teachers would just need to choose the CBM they want to focus on, go to their grade and see, okay, what's a reasonable amount of growth? And like we said, that's based on district-wide trends in performance. So some of these numbers might kind of freak somebody out, like, wow, addition to 10 for first grade, a 40 to 45 point gain. And again, this is why it's recommended. So if your teachers aren't comfortable with that, you're certainly welcome to look at your own school specific context. How did you guys perform? We can't provide that for everybody in a document. So what we can do is the district averages. And you don't have to follow our recommendations. You could choose to ignore them if you'd like. But they're here to help you write goals that should be attainable. And then we have it for reducing intensive intervention. So it's just kind of flipped in terms of we're still picking our CBM, we're still inserting our fall score, but now we're talking about how many points do we want to go in the other direction, making that reduction in intensive intervention. So for passage oral reading, we could see for all 3 grades, the recommendation is you want to shoot for a 15 to 20 point reduction in that intensive intervention. And so if we scored at 50% in the fall, we'd shoot for 30% in the spring. We have a similar example here for math. So that's for the CBMs. Now I'll take a couple minutes to talk about the CATs. For the CATs, we have the same 2 typo goals that we recommend, increasing at or above benchmark or reducing intervention. But we also know people like using that SGP data to set goals. So what we recommend is if you want to go the SGP route, we recommend looking at the percentage of students who will earn a 50 SGP or above in looking at their SGP scores, their gross scores from fall to spring. So this would even apply to if you set a 65 SGP goal for your students in intensive intervention. We would say, hey, when you're setting your SPM goal, just still set it for 50, and that's what you would judge yourself on what percentage of my students were at 50 or above. And this is nice because with the averages, the data can be skewed a little bit by some outliers. If you have some students that are really performing in that intensive intervention, that 1 through 9 percentile rank, here we kind of take out any ability to skew. It's about each individual student you know, what percentage of them did you get to that 50 SGP point? Looking at the at or above benchmark, the recommendations, they're the same actually for both reading and math and across all grade levels. So if you want to increase your at or above benchmark scores, we recommend in your SPM setting a goal that's 5 to 10 points above your fall baseline score. Okay, and again, it's the same for math and ELA, regardless of grade span. For reducing intensive intervention, if you're using the CATS, it's the same thing. Math and ELA, regardless of grade span, we're recommending a set a goal that's 5 to 10 points change from where you started in the fall. So we could see here going from 50% intensive intervention to 40%. Again, you might have an appetite to bite off a little bit more. You're welcome to do that. This is what we recommend based on reviewing the district-wide trends in student change from fall to spring. Lastly, with that SGP target, SGP is all about your growth from fall to spring, but again, we're not actually taking a baseline into account because everybody is starting at a different point when it comes to their SGP. Each student, you know, their growth is going to look different in terms of that recommendation. But what we do want to see is what percentage of our students can hit that 50 SGP or above. And so the goal recommendations for ELA are the same across grade spans. So you would just plug in, we want to see 50 to 55%, you can make that choice, of students earning a 50 SGP or above when we look at the you know, growth from fall to spring. For math for 3 to 5 and 6 to 8, we found in looking at the district data, it's a little bit higher, the performance there, the growth scores were higher. So we recommend 55 to 60 as the range for 3 to 5 and 6 to 8. And then for 9 to 12, we say 50 to 55. I'll talk about this in a minute. The PESO team is happy to come out and support your teachers during PLCs with setting their SPM goals. Because I know this guidance is a lot. You might have some people doing CBMs, and then you got another group coming in doing the CATs. So we're more than happy to help come out and support with this. All right. I'm actually not sure, Robert, about whether teachers have to do both. I would consult with somebody else at your building. We're really just helping out with the goal setting process. But beyond that, we don't have too much else to do with the SPM process itself. The other thing that I think will be really nice about this, and then I'll move on, is by setting like really tight, smart, attainable SPM goals, we'll be able to come out and help your teachers monitor those goals throughout the year after windows. And I think the data is just going to be more meaningful because they should hopefully be seeing some progress. And if they do have a window where the scores are not as high as they'd like, because the goals aren't going to be set so ridiculously high, it shouldn't be so deflating that people feel defeated and like, I'm not going to look at this any further. So we're hoping this will, you know, boost engagement around STAR. So that takes us, and we're coming close to winding down. I know we're up against the end here. Some upcoming STAR training opportunities. So the PESO team has been going out offering STAR 101 and STAR 102. We wanted to link the decks here in case you as champions just want access to them at any point to refer to them, or if you want to turn these around on your own time. 101 is really fundamental. How do I administer the test? What are the key metrics and reports? What are the two different key assessments, CBMs and CATs, and what are the difference between them? 102 is more about how to start making your data actionable. So we go over creating groups, looking at skill recommendations for groups, and then assigning skill checks for groups. For those who aren't aware, skill checks are little 5-question multiple choice tests that STAR provides within the system. They're pre-created, and you can assign them to groups of students, and they focus on a single skill. So if you're like, hey, I really focused on my small group intervention time this week on this one skill with this group, you could use a skill check as a pre and a post to see, what kind of learning took place. So they're available for you. You can also always reach out to your PESO rep if you'd like them to come out and do one of these sessions with your team. As the year goes on, I would say 101 is less relevant because your team should be pretty aware of the nuts and bolts of how to administer STAR. But 102 is kind of always a relevant session. Additionally, starting on 9/19, the PESO team is offering to do a couple sessions with your schools. So first, we could come out and analyze fall STAR data. We'll use the district's data analysis protocol for STAR. And we can also come out and do that SPM and the individual, student progress monitoring goal setting with you guys. So that could take place in any number of formats, but we're certainly welcome to come to your PLCs and to support with that work if you'd like. The PESO team usually communicates with principals. So you might want to chat with your principal about this because they may have already booked them to come in, or they might have gotten the email and not really paid attention to it. And you might come in and say, hey, actually, it would be great to use them in this time. So wanted to flag that. Additionally, Renaissance is generously offering to provide on a monthly basis a STAR 101 session. So this would be useful if you get some new teachers who come in during the year who need to be trained on STAR. Maybe you just kind of don't have the time to really sit down with them to knock that all out. You can refer them to these sessions. These are 101s that are in Cornerstone, and anybody's welcome to sign up for these at your school. So even if you just have other folks who are interested, maybe you have some special ed teachers who are just starting to learn about the STAR platform, but they've never been trained, this could be a good session for them as well. Additionally, we have Priscilla Mendez, our Renaissance District consultant, who's always available to work with you to try to set up a support session. And that can really be in regards to anything related to STAR. Priscilla's really flexible with that and open to any needs you have. So you can click on her link here to see what availability she has. And of course, don't hesitate to reach out to us at the STAR assessment email if you ever have questions. So that takes us to the end here. We have our attendance form and survey. Real quick, I just want to note we have some key resources here that we highly recommend you check out. STAR resources for the field goaler, teacher guide to STAR reports, assessment calendar, also some information for parents. Here's your PESO rep if you're not aware. They're assigned by network. You can see their contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out to them. And here are key contacts related to Renaissance employees, and then also our STAR assessment account at the district. So we'll hang on. If people have questions, we're happy to take those. Otherwise, please just make sure you fill out the attendance form and survey. It's both are contained within the same Google form. And otherwise, thank you so much for coming out today. We really appreciate it.
And just thank you for what you do at the school to support STAR. We know STAR wouldn't be successful without you. So thank you for your time, attention today, and all the efforts you do at your schools to make STAR work. Thank you. And yes, we will share the recording, Jillian, once it gives a day or two, but we will share the recording, yes.